Okay, we're live. Like I said, we'll give folks just a couple minutes here to get signed on and
Hey,
get
where
on
are
the
you
stream.
situated, Rob? Where are you situated?
I'm in Fort McMurray.
Yeah, but where? Because you got a brick wall behind you.
I'm actually in my home. I'm in my home office. I built a little studio here. Ellis, I've been doing this for I've been doing political commentary for about 3 years now. Started doing it in 2017, and what kind of got me interested in it was when we had, the NDP came in, and I saw, a lot of destruction of our industry, and then we had the Liberals start attacking us, and I got really frustrated, and it motivated me to start speaking. And from my level, it's hard to do a whole bunch, but if I can help raise some awareness and educate people on what's happening around us, that's kind of what I feel is a bit of a contribution to what's happening, right? So that's kind of why I got into it.
And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
39.
39. That's still kind of young.
A little bit, but I deal with so many young guys that are deep into politics that it's like I was actually pretty old. I never even got politically engaged until I started doing this. I was just blind to everything for forever, and then it really started affecting me personally because I'm in Fort McMurray, which is the heart of the industry in a lot of ways in Canada. And the frustration got to me, and that's when I really dug in and I started learning. And I think a lot of the people that have been following me, they've watched me learn as the years have gone by. And I kind of went through all the phases of maturity with politics, where at first everything was black and white, and then it didn't make so much sense. And now the stuff that doesn't make sense still doesn't make sense, but it makes sense why it doesn't make sense at this point. So
Welcome to the club. That's my story too.
you're forever deciphering people's motives and everything, right?
Yeah, but politics is a totally different animal. I
Oh,
mean,
totally.
you see what's right, but you also see the other side that's kind of spinning it or twisting it around, and you kind of lose that answer,
Yep.
somewhere along the.
Well, and that's I think part of my maturity was coming into this. I always felt there was a level of insincerity with people that I was listening to, and I always kind of went along with it. And then as time went on, I started to learn more about the people who were advocating for our resources, and watching guys like yourself and people get engaged in this. And I started realizing, okay, there's some really good people involved in this stuff, and there's some people who don't care. They're not in it for personal wealth or personal gain. It's not a ton of people, but we've got people who are really advocating for the industry. We've got people who really care about impoverished communities and really want Canadians to be better and do better. And I've been gravitating towards those people now. Those are kind of I'm actually less active with any particular party at this point, and more interested in politicians as individuals, I'd say. Kind of shed all of the party affiliation stuff and just started liking individuals, right? So we've got about 115 people watching total right now. So I think it's probably a good time to get started. Just at first, I just want to thank you. It's such a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you. Like I mentioned to you before we got online here, I've been kind of following your stuff for a couple of years now. I'd say you've probably been advocating for resources since I was a child. You've been in this game for a while. You're a battle ready, fellow that when it comes to fighting for people's livelihoods and for our industry. And and I mentioned to you the one thing that really jumped out, and if people do have an opportunity to see this, the CTV interview you did, this is the one that really caught my eye with Evan Solomon. You had a little debate, and just when you were doing that debate and the passion you were speaking about the industry with, and the way you were the way you shed off some of the lines that these activists and these people against our industry tend to feed us, I just really appreciated it. So if you don't mind, Alice, why don't you just introduce yourself and let everybody know what you do and what you've been doing for the industry and for the folks in your communities.
Well, my name is Ellis Ross. I'm currently the MLA for Skeena, which is on the west coast of British Columbia, Kitimat specifically, the heart of the export industry for LNG going to Asia, down to one company that got their certificate and is currently building their project. I'm born and raised on reserve, and yes, I am a status Indian. And yes, this is my real hair, and I basically started out as just a regular guy that spent most of my adult life, trying to get a job, trying to put food on the table, any which way I could. And because there was no real jobs in my area when I was growing up as a young man, I resorted to under the table things and things that aren't really formal. And, throughout that struggle, I never really had the chance to understand that there's a bigger world out there to get a mortgage, to get a full-time job, because there just wasn't any opportunity here.
Yeah.
And so, I as a young man, I grew up typical of Aboriginals growing up on reserve. I grew up angry. I grew up relying on alcohol and drugs, and always getting into fights. And then it just changed. There's a couple of triggers in my life that actually put me on different directions, starting when I was a teenager, and then as a young adult, and as an older adult. And then I got asked to run for council in 2003, and that's where this all started to take off.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting, listening to some of your backstory and everything, was how basketball played a big role in your life. Do you mind just walking us through how that impacted you and what changed there?
Well, I'm the youngest of 5 boys, and I've got 2 sisters, one older, one younger. And I was a skinny, uncoordinated kid growing up on reserve. Those are the days when you used to play street hockey and, pick up soccer games. And so I was always picked last because I just wasn't the sporting type. And when I got older, I never took an interest in sports. But when I got older in grade 7, grade 8, my best friend told me that I should join basketball, mainly because you get to travel and you get to meet girls. And so I joined for that reason. But we never did travel and we never did meet girls. And I just goofed around, I didn't really take it seriously. And, a couple times, we got slaughtered all the time. We were lousy. And we got slaughtered once. And the captain of the other team didn't even shake my hand. He just kind of slapped my fingers and said, "Piece of cake." And I took that so personal. Even though I was just a goof. But then later on, I started to take more interest in basketball. What is it? What's a layup? What's a jump shot? But later on, I was standing outside my condemned fire hall. It was condemned 7 times. And I was standing out there as usual at night with my buddies, smoking dope, staying out till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was watching people drive by in cars with, loud music and girls inside. And I just realized, man, at 14 years old, I'm going to amount to nothing. I'm going to walk the village for the rest of my life. I'm not going to get a car. I'm not going to get a girlfriend. I'm not going to do anything. So, what do I got? I got nothing. So at that point, I made the decision right there while I was standing in front of the fire hall. That's it. I'm going to stop smoking drugs. And I'm going to do what I can to become a good basketball player. That's the only reason I did it. But, later on, I became such a good ball player that I am now in the Prince Rupert All-Native Hall of Fame.
I saw
because
that.
all I did was train, run the road, sit-ups, push-ups, stay up at the gym till midnight, join all the senior men's practices. And I got taken all over for different tournaments at different divisions. And that's what basically took me off the road. But it was never a conscious decision to say drugs are bad and I got to walk away. It was just something that in me that said, I got to carve out something for myself. Otherwise, I'm going nowhere. And that's what basketball did for me.
Yeah. And you did some coaching as well, didn't you, with a lot of the young folks in the communities, eh? That must have been fulfilling.
I actually started the pups. I think it was 10 years and under pups team, boys. And then after that, because my 2 girls that I had growing up, there was no basketball program in my village for girls, 17 and under. So I started that program up. But I always tried to look for the best teaching in terms of fundamental skills for basketball. But I also, did as much as I could to teach life skills to these kids, especially girls. And it was a different teaching for boys, but it was always about what do you want to be? You can't play basketball forever. You're not going to get paid for it. And drinking on weekends is a road to nowhere. So you got to think more about the discipline on your off the court life, just as much as you think about winning. So we developed winning programs in our community under that mythology. And I was very strict. I was very disciplined. I trained the heck out of these poor kids, but we had tremendous success. And, a lot of those kids nowadays still remember those lessons. And quite frankly, a lot of those kids, didn't travel the road I did in terms of alcohol abuse or drug abuse.
Yeah. And how did that basketball experience and everything, how did that play? How did that kind of feed into your style of politics and leadership?
Well, number one, in 2003, when I got nominated for council, I let my name stand because I thought that I could take council's vast resources and their huge bank account, and I could take some of that money and divert it to my basketball teams, because it was tough trying to raise funds when there's no money around.
Yeah.
But it took me a few months to realize my council was flat broke. They had no money. In fact, they owed more money than was coming in. And Canada, if you don't understand the nature of the Indian Act, when I got into council, they were halfway through this process of Canada coming in and basically shutting our council down because we couldn't pay our bills.
Wow. Wow.
And so that's what I got into. And so I had to learn from scratch. I used to carry a digital dictionary around with me to understand what these guys are talking about. I try to understand the agreements, the Indian Act, all of this stuff. And so it was a rude awakening to find out that we were one of the poorest on the West Coast. And so all I did was sit and listen and learn and read and try to understand the overall nature of what we're in. And today is totally different, by the way.
Yeah. So you've been in politics for quite a while, and there was a big announcement over the last week about a position that you're running for. Why don't you tell everybody what that is?
Well, the BC Liberals in BC are basically without a leader right now. In 2010, the BC Liberals won the most seats in the House as opposed to the NDP party as well as the Green Party. But the NDP and the Green Party combined with their seats took over government. And so at that point, Christy Clark resigned, and we went into a leadership race. The leader came out to be Andrew Wilkinson. I was asked to run in that race, but I declined. I didn't know enough. But now Andrew Wilkinson has stepped down. And so now that triggers a 1 year in the constitution of the BC Liberals that we have to choose a new leader. So given the last 3 or 4 years that I've been learning in the legislature and learning about politics, I figured I better put my name in a race because I'm really concerned about where BC is in terms of the economy and in terms of our society. So I have the BC Liberal leadership race this year.
And it's probably a little bit strange for people to hear that there's a card-carrying conservative running for leadership of the BC Liberals, but something I'm not sure people know about BC, but the Liberals in BC are much different than the Liberals throughout the rest of Canada. There's a big difference between parties there, and from my understanding, the BC Liberals tend to be far more conservative than I would say any other Liberal party throughout Canada.
That's because the BC Liberals are not affiliated with the federal Liberals. I mean, you look at the NDP across Canada, that's all one big party, federally, provincially. The BC Liberals are actually, we're our own entity, and what we call ourselves a coalition. We call ourselves a big tent party, meaning anybody, with any kind of ideology can come in. And, there's a couple of people in my party I really think have green credentials, for example. And there's a number of them that are federal Liberals. There's a number of them that are conservatives. And And then there's some that I don't even think, really subscribe to any party,
Yeah.
including me.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's a big difference between BC Liberals and federal Liberals, but yes, you're also right that I am a card-carrying federal Conservative as well.
Yeah. Now, Ellis, when I first started kind of following what you were saying, and again, I go back to that, especially that debate you had on CTV with Evan Solomon hosting. What really stood out to me was your support for our industry and developing our natural resources. And I found it really interesting, your reasoning for it. I mean, a lot of people advocate for wealth and prosperity, but you were coming from the perspective about lifting people out of poverty. That seems to be, the crux of your argument for oil and gas. What made you so passionate about that piece, and what got you so focused on that part? Because I even saw, in your work with the Liberal Party, that seems to be a lot of your focus as well.
Yes, mainly because I connect up a strong economy with a strong society, and I boil it right down to the individual, who doesn't have a future to resort to the black market, of a drug or doing something under the table, and doesn't have the ability to actually set up a strong future, like say, get a mortgage or build a family. And this is because uh, I've lived it. I've lived the experience, and as well, I had to have my mentality when I first started as council in 2003. I opposed everything. I opposed forestry, smelting, LNG, oil, mining, you name it, I opposed it because I was kind of believing some of the narrative that was out there. But it was actually one of my fellow councillors that took me aside and said, you know what, maybe you should research some of these projects. Maybe you should look at the state that our people are in. And then make your decision. And so I did. And I was shocked to find out that I wasn't the only guy that was unemployed. I was shocked to understand that I wasn't the only one going through social issues as a native on reserve or off reserve. And so I started looking for different ways to resolve that. And what you hear in the media is actually not totally true in terms of education is the key. We tried that, and we educated a number of our people, trying to get them to a better place. But when they found out that there was no job waiting for them, they got disillusioned and they got
Yeah.
angry. And so for more ways to kind of help with our social issues and help with our band council's health. And it finally dawned on me, in a couple of examples where we got a couple of our band members some employment. And I noticed the value system changed for those band members. No longer were they thinking about, why is my welfare check late, or I can't go as I had a wild weekend. The more I talk, they're starting to dream big now. You've shown them, you opened the door, and they're on their own. And now they're talking about, well, I'm trying to establish my credit rating, so I bought a car. I'm trying to save up now for a mortgage off reserve because I'm not going to depend on for a house. And so when I saw that, I started thinking about what actually made that happen. And it was the simple matter of just getting them a job. And so I put two and two together. I say, okay, if I want to do this for the 80% unemployment level on my reserve, I've got to think about encouraging economy because some of the businesses we did as council failed. And so I started looking outwardly to try to work with corporations and different groups, to get more and more people in meaningful employment. And it was quite satisfying, even to the point where I helped people get out of prison.
Yeah.
But I didn't. It wasn't free for all. It was just, you have to prove to me you really want a different your life, and you're
Yeah.
going to commit to a more stable future. And so I just wanted more of that. And that the more I saw the progress, the more I thought, CC is so good at responsible development. I don't feel bad about actually bringing even more in. with the standards that we have here in BC.
Well, and something I
why,
think that, oh, go ahead, Ellis. I interrupted you there.
No, I'm done. There's a bit of a lag here between you and me, so I understand. So I'm trying to give you time to kind of talk there.
Okay. Yeah, and just for everybody here, we do have a little bit of a lag going. So Ellis and we're going to manage the conversation slowly here. So just bear with us. We'll work through it. But one of the things I find, Ellis, is society is so prosperous nowadays. I mean, I grew up in Nova Scotia. I grew up on a farm. We had nothing growing up. I could have never dreamed my life would be the way it is right now. And I think something that happens in society nowadays is we forget that there are a lot of disillusioned people out there. We forget that there are a ton of people who don't have the opportunities that we see before them. And I mean, as well as I do, what that leads to. That leads to crime, that leads to abuse, there's a ton of really terrible things that leads to for these people. And ultimately they end up in these cycles where that just turns into their lifestyle, right? And that's why I've always appreciated your perspective and the work you do advocating for these folks, because that's, if you can shock them out of that lifestyle and give them that opportunity, I mean, these people can achieve great things, right? I mean, I've seen it plenty of times where, myself included, I didn't have a lot of opportunity. I didn't have a lot going for me. And, I left the province, I came to Alberta, and it's been wonderful for me ever since. So again, just greatly appreciate you trying to bring those opportunities to the folks within these communities.
Well, I focus a lot in terms of bringing LNG at opportunity to Kitimat, because I was chief councillor 6 years, and I resigned as chief councillor to be an MLA. It was a tough decision, but because LNG was stalled, I felt I had to get to a higher level. But when I came out of that chief councillor's job and I became an MLA, I was pretty surprised at the amount of call came up to me and thanked me for the work that I had done on LNG, because they were on welfare, they had no future, they had no, and so I started to look at a cross section, especially young people who felt the future, and I know exactly how they felt. And then you go back even further, what kind of a tough life I had, as well as my ancestors had. When I was a kid, we didn't have plumbing. We had to go to the creek and collect water, and we had to go empty the bathroom bucket. We had to go outside as men to use the bathroom, whatnot. We didn't get electric heat in my house till probably my mom's house until probably the late 80s. So we had wood heat. So it was a hard life. But when I started to talk to more people, non-nationals, there's a lot of people out there that had hard lives too. And there was a lot of people that were just trying to find a way. I don't know what the percentage of the population is, but not everybody is set up for life, to go to college, get a job, already got a good line on a mortgage. My family already set up a good, stable environment for me to succeed in. I mean, God bless you. Good for you. Great. I love that. But there's a lot of people, non-natives, natives, that are not in that boat. And so this idea of separating us in terms of race. Now, I totally understand the demographics of First Nations and what they're going through. And that's the big reason why I do what I do. But there's also a lot of natives in that same boat. And this is why I think about a strong individual, then you have a strong community. You have communities, then you have a strong province. And I think an economy, based on my experience, it's been proven, a good economy supports the majority of British Columbians. But there's ways to do this that actually gives a lift to those most disadvantaged who really need that lift. It's proven in my territory. So there's a way to do this without actually going back to the taxpayer for more. The economy, if it's managed right, can actually take care of that.
Yeah, and far too often the political solution to these things is, hey, let's go further into debt and let's give more handouts. And the most frustrating part is we've got this monster of an energy industry in Canada that if we just put enough fuel into it, it would just take off. And it would solve 90% of our economic issues. There's so much to go around in Canada, but you get these activists and these people who are fighting against resource development, and they're surprisingly successful at what they do. I remember growing up, and I used to see the activists as the smaller party who was struggling to get their voice heard and who was fighting against big industry. But I find with the energy sector and with the resource industry in Canada, it's almost the opposite. The activists have such a large voice, and I don't know if they're so well funded. I don't know what drives it. I'm sure you've got some better insight than I do into that. It just seems like there's such a powerful force that they're eliminating these opportunities from these disadvantaged communities that you're trying to advocate for, right?
Well, I can tell you that I started out as an environmentalist, not an activist. And I think there's a separation there. I mean, I really think Canadians truly care about the environment, and they want to know that both themselves are doing what they can to look after the environment, and their governments and corporations are doing what they can. And this is what I'm seeing. I mean, we're really responsible in Canada and BC. We got higher standards. But in the same time, the quality of life in Canada that is high standards, the quality of life we have here, it didn't happen by accident. And it didn't happen because of government. Because government's got no money. Government's got actually taxpayers' money and revenues off of some of the stuff that they regulate. And so I don't get why, if you enjoyed standard life, good hospitals, nurses, you name it, a lot of services, you enjoyed a good life, and we're trying to do better in terms of the environmental impact. Why that same standard of life the next generation, your kids and your grandkids? And over the years, I've grown an appreciation and love for BC, because you look at what's going on around the world, where there's abuses of human rights, or there's no real democracy or freedom of speech, or the freedom of women to participate in the economy or society. We're really lucky here in Canada. And I don't get why Canada, you're rich in resources, you have high standards of, you actually sell resources at discount rates to the United States. And we're talking about oil. And so the United States can get a premium dollar for it on the international market. I don't understand that. I mean, I thought government, you strip it down to the true form of what government should be. I thought government should be looking out for the country and the province of today and tomorrow, and make sure that what was handed down, because there's a lot more generations to come. And this is mainly why I took the environmental critic role, because it takes me full. I still believe in protecting the environment, but I also believe that there should be a balance in terms of what we build for British Columbians. Because I don't want to see anybody leave town. I don't see them resort to black markets. I don't want to see us become out for a state. I don't want to see that. And I think if we have a conversation about that, we can come out of COVID, and for the last 3 years of what our government has done to us here in BC, I think we can come out even stronger. I know it's going to take time to reverse this political narrative. This is bigger than me. It's way bigger than me. It's fighting for the future of BC, and maybe even for the future of Canada.
Yeah. That's one thing people don't realize is if you look at the world, if you look at the standard of living we have, very small percentage of people on the planet enjoy this. I mean, I would say the majority of the people in the world are struggling and don't have near the resources or the enjoyment in life that we have here. And when I see people fighting to bring us down and limit people's potential and limit people's opportunities and keep people in that same state of being impoverished, I mean, it's really it's very frustrating to see. Again, you and I spoke when I first got into this. It was because I was motivated because of what I saw the government doing, and to have government come in and protest against our resources without even thinking about the damage they're doing, and without even thinking. I mean, you look at resources, you look at oil, for example. Billions of people have been lifted out of poverty because of these resources, but somehow they've managed to demonize it to the point that they're almost shutting us down, and they're keeping people down, and they're keeping people impoverished. So it's just, I don't fully understand it. I know there's a facet of these groups who probably have some really good intentions, but then there's something different that's driving it, and probably taking advantage of a lot of these people and their goodwill, and putting us in the situation that we see ourselves in.
Well, when I was chief counselor, the United Nations did a worldwide consultation on some of the 21 or 22 objectives that they were trying to achieve. And they were going to community to kind of get people to talk about that and feed it back into the United Nations. And the moderator put up a number of issues on the board for us to talk about. And the one that jumped out at me was, how one contradicted the other. I mean, in one breath, they were saying, okay, we're going to get poverty in the world. But in another section on the board, it said, to get rid of poverty, one of the most central questions you got to answer is access to energy, namely energy. And so I pointed this out to moderators. I said, wait a minute. I mean, you're looking to reduce the energy, the production of energy in terms of oil and gas around the world. You're looking to do that. But also at the same time, you're talking about emerging countries' access to energy. I mean, how do you expect an emerging country, to pay for the most expensive form of energy? I mean, poor countries actually gravitate forms, and that's why they're burning coal. They're burning, cow feces. They're burning diesel. They're burning everything they can for energy. And so we talked about it a bit back and forth, and we finally said, look, we don't have answers either. Well, that's why we're coming to you guys. And my point was that, well, Jesus, if you guys don't have the answers, I'm just chief counselor from a small little village. How am I supposed to answer this? But I could see, the key to my people getting out of poverty is giving them the opportunity, whether it be the forestry sector, the LNG sector, the oil sector. That's the key for me. But you're telling me, you're giving me mixed messages here, and in a global sense. I don't. So, by the way, in terms of energy, China and India are going to do it anyway, with or without Canada. They're going to access energy in any which way form they can. They're not really, I have these stories about the commitment to green energy in China. Well, I went to China, and I didn't see the commitment there, and I didn't talk to those there. I didn't have the sense there. What I sensed was a whole generation of Asians that wanted even half the quality of life Indians enjoy. And I got my butt handed to me by an 18-year-old Asian girl that really put me in my place in that topic.
Yeah. And you hear a lot of these politicians, they talk about, the evils of oil and our energy industry. And, you saw it in the States with the cancellation of Keystone. Their response to the thousands and thousands of jobs that were lost is, well, those people will go get new jobs in green energy, without acknowledging that those jobs aren't there right now, without acknowledging that, sure, maybe there's some opportunity somewhere else, but you're still eliminating these jobs from this community, and these people are still suffering as a result of those job losses. I find at that level, they're so quick to just brush everybody off. And this culture of virtue signaling we have, where they cancel some big projects, they wave their hands as though they've conquered the world, and and they've done something wonderful for everybody. And if you've ever seen the movie Team America, this group comes in and they're there to help everybody. They end up destroying a whole city in the process of trying to help everybody. And that's what I see a lot of these people doing is on the surface, they look and it feels like they're doing something good. But what you never see is these communities where these jobs didn't materialize, or these communities with Keystone that everything was working. You had thousands of people in work, and with the swipe of a pen, they shut it all down. And now these people have nowhere to go, and they don't have means to put food on the table. And to see, it's exacerbated so much with COVID now. We've got so many people suffering that now should be the time that we're really embracing energy and really embracing these projects and doing everything we can to keep these people working. But it doesn't seem to be the interest.
No, and you think about, our leaders talking about economic recovery, and the economics of BC, I thought were starting to go down 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then COVID hit. Now it's going to be, but in terms of economic recovery, I don't think anybody's really talking about the idea about how aggressive our neighboring jurisdictions are going to be, meaning the United States, European Union, Australia, Asia. Everyone needs to make sure that their economy is stronger so that they can actually look after their citizens. And, I don't see that plan coming out of BC. And to the amount of people that lost their future in terms of the Keystone getting canceled, this is basically why I do what I do. Because I've seen what happens when a person's life falls apart, and now they don't know. I struggled to get my down payment together for a mortgage. My kids are invested in the school here for the last 6 years. They'd love to graduate here. All their friends are here. My mother lives here, and I'd like to look after her. That human interest story is actually why I started doing what I do, since 2004. But to kind of multiply that, to say, well, 100 people lost their jobs, lost their future. Well, 1,000 people lost their jobs. 10,000 people lost their jobs. You almost become desensitized to the issue that what it feels like to be that person that has no roadmap now. And now they're thinking, geez, do I gotta move to the United States? Do I gotta, go to some part of Canada, or what do I do? And it's just heartbreaking for me when really top down, without the political rhetoric, talk about, and it's going to be a brutal conversation. I understand that, but talk about what it means to have a strong economy and what the benefit is. And it goes back to the strong person, strong community, strong province, in my opinion, because I've lived it.
Yeah. It's something really refreshing talking to you that I don't hear from politicians nowadays is that individualism, that talk of the individual. I find nowadays the aim is to separate us out into buckets and demographics and paint everybody with that brush, but just your conversation around strengthening the individual, giving the individual the opportunities, supporting the individual, and that focus on these specific people that are losing these jobs. What's that experience for that person? And like I said, I grew up poor on a farm, and I know what my family went through, and I know the struggles. And that's one of the things that almost motivates me is that fear of, what if I have to go back to that? What if everything fails and you have to go there? And we don't think that way anymore nowadays. It's everybody's thinking big numbers, like it was only 10,000 jobs, but again, they're not thinking about the individuals and the experience those people are having. On the other end of that, without embracing our energy industry, you look at the deficit situation we're in with Canada, and that's another thing. I've got a young family. I've got 2 kids that are 7, one that's 10. And I just keep seeing, every $1 billion, and it's kind of that big grand thinking again. Everybody, like we used to think $1 billion was a lot. Well, now we're going into deficit by the hundreds of billions of dollars, and people are getting desensitized to that. And every dollar we don't extract from our resource sector and we go into debt for, in my mind, is a dollar that's going to come out of the pockets of my children in the future. That's going to be a dollar of opportunity they don't have. That's going to be a dollar of opportunity these impoverished communities don't have. And all because we went on this wild spending spree and we didn't support our energy industry enough to fill that void and that gap when it comes to revenue, right?
Well, I'm not sure who has the bad connection.
Did you catch me there, Ellis?
Yeah, but you're cutting in and out. I'm not sure who has the bad connection here.
Oh, okay.
I'm hoping everybody can hear. But that's one of the reasons why I signed up as a conservative, because number one, I think every party has got something off in terms of where we're heading as a nation. Number two, the reason I joined was because of the fiscal responsibility that federal conservatives seem to have. And number three, the reason I joined was because I've seen federal conservatives, when they're in power, their efforts to actually help First Nations become, and it was staged. It was staged in terms of amending funding agreements. It was staged in terms of introducing the land management code to give First Nations more responsibility over their own reserve systems, and in terms of amend the Education Act to give more control to First Nations in terms of how they spend the money that gets transferred to First Nations from the federal government. And so I saw this, and people didn't understand what it meant. So if First Nation was looking for, dreams of independence or self-governance, then here's a safe way to do it, to explore that and try it out in a safe manner. But the fiscal responsibility is going to be huge. Provincially, that BC government's going into deficit. I think it's 15 billion, and the Canadian government's going to deficit. I imagine every province in Canada is going to go into deficit at some level. Just don't know how much it's yet, because nobody knows. No. Which is, I can understand the deficit financing. In fact, every First Nation knows deficit and surplus. It's the feature of the Indian Act. But in Act, if you get a surplus at the end of the year, or you get a deficit, you get punished. So if you manage it well and you have a surplus, the Canadian funding agreement punishes you. If you come out with a deficit, you get punished. But when you come out of that at a federal level, there is no real punishment. The aftermath is basically, at some point, you're going to have to pay the bill. And it's probably going to be your kids or your grandkids, in terms of the services that will get cut, or the taxes, and that have to get risen. And this is the good part about having a strong economy. The strong economy can help pay back that deficit, or pay off that debt that's actually trying to keep you afloat from the deficit. Governance 101 that a lot of First Nations learn under. So if you apply that principle to provincial governments and federal governments, I mean, you can almost see what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years if we don't get this under control.
Yeah, we're not going to be in good shape. So Ellis, we're just about at the 45-minute mark here. I'm gonna call the chat at this point in time. One thing I would highly recommend to everybody who's watching right now, if you have an opportunity, now if you go to YouTube, you have to type in Ellis B. Ross, because there's a few musicians named Ellis Ross or Ross Ellis that come up. But if you type in Ellis B. Ross, you'll see a number of videos of Ellis explaining his views. There's some really good ones out there that I would highly recommend you guys go and watch. The other thing too, Ellis, you're going to have quite the battle on your hands politically here, and I'd really love to get you on the live stream again throughout it, just to check in with you and follow up on some of the work you're doing and how everything's going. Again, I said it at the beginning, I've been watching you for a while, and I spoke about the few politicians that I see that are really in it for the people, and Ton of respect for you. I absolutely see you as one of those politicians that's in it for the betterment of people's lives. And again, that strong focus on impoverished communities and lifting people out of poverty is something I greatly appreciate.
Very much. And yeah, I'll keep in touch.
Okay, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll be talking to you guys again next week on Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.